Helena Harrow was still wearing her wedding pearls when her husband announced that she would be dead before the daffodils opened. He did not whisper it beside her sickbed. The Duke of Rothbury said it over champagne, before 12 dinner guests, and the woman he intended to marry after Helena had been buried. She won't see spring, he said. By Lady Day, Helena owned the house in which he had left her. This was a story of a broken vow, a quiet rebellion, and a woman who refused to die merely because powerful men had already divided the spoils of her death. The January wind pressed wet fingers against the windows of Rothbury House. Coal smoke hung beneath the dining room ceiling, mingling with beeswax, roasted pheasant, and the bitter medicine clinging to Helena's tongue. She sat at the far end of the table in a gown of dove-grey silk. Her wedding pearls felt cold against her throat. 3 days earlier, she had stood beside Julian Harrow, the 8th Duke of Rothbury, and promised obedience before God, half the peerage, and an uncle who had counted every candle used during the ceremony. Now her husband was discussing her death with Lady Cressida Mowbray. Cressida wore garnets dark as drops of blood. She occupied the chair at Julian's right hand, the place that should have belonged to his Duchess. No one questioned it. Their affair had been an open secret for 2 years, and Julian's marriage had not ended it. The marriage had only supplied the money required to protect it. My physician is rarely mistaken, Julian continued. Lady Helena has a constitution unsuited to winter. Greythorne will provide quiet for what remains of it. A fork scraped against porcelain. Helena looked down the length of the table. Her husband's face was handsome in the hard, careless fashion of a marble emperor. He was 34, broad-shouldered, dark-haired, and accustomed to people mistaking arrogance for strength. "Greythorne?" she asked. Julian's gaze travelled towards her as though he had forgotten she was present. "My grandmother's house in Derbyshire. I was told we would reside here after our wedding. You were told what was necessary to conclude the arrangement." Cressida lifted her champagne. "The country air may do wonders, Your Grace." A few guests lowered their eyes. Not one defended her. Helena curled her fingers beneath the tablecloth until her nails pressed crescents into her palm. Her uncle had warned her that the marriage would not be affectionate. He had called it an honourable exchange. The Duke received £40,000 from the Ashworth marriage settlement. Helena received a title, protection, and a permanent home. She had not expected love. She had expected a locked door to keep out the rain. "How soon am I to leave?" she asked. "At first light. And you, Your Grace? I have parliamentary business in London." Cressida smiled into her glass. The answer was plain enough. Helena reached for the small brown bottle beside her plate. Dr. Pritchard had instructed her to take 20 drops of laudanum after every meal. The medicine eased her cough, but it also wrapped the world in wool. Her hands shook as she loosened the stopper. Cressida leaned towards Julian and murmured something that made him laugh. The medicine slipped from Helena's fingers. It struck the table and rolled across the white cloth, leaving a reddish-brown stain like diluted blood. No one moved to help her. Julian watched the stain spread. "You see why Greythorne is best." Helena lifted her eyes. "Do you?" The question was barely louder than the rain, yet Julian's smile vanished. She placed the stopper back in the bottle. Her hands had stopped trembling. "If I am expected to die in your grandmother's house," she said, "I should like to know whether the roof keeps out the weather." It did when she was alive, and how long ago was that? 11 years. Cressida's laugh was soft and polished. "You cannot expect His Grace to remember the condition of every unused property." "No," Helena said. "I begin to understand what I may expect from His Grace." The silence that followed was broken by the butler announcing that the carriage had been ordered for 6. Helena rose. Julian remained seated. "Good night, Your Grace." He inclined his head. "Good night, Duchess." It was the first time he had used her title since the wedding. It sounded less like an honour than a dismissal. As Helena crossed the dining room, she heard Cressida ask whether morning black suited her complexion. Helena did not turn around, not yet. At 6 the following morning, sleet swept through Grosvenor Square. The Rothbury carriage waited beneath the portico, its lamps burning dimly behind wet glass. Helena's luggage had been reduced to 2 trunks because Julian's steward claimed the roads near Greythorne were too poor for a heavier load. No maid had volunteered to accompany her. Mrs. Finch, an elderly housekeeper with a stiff knee and 40 years in the Harrow family service, stood beside the carriage, holding a leather valise. "His Grace ordered only the coachman and a footman," Helena said. "His Grace has issued many foolish orders," Mrs. Finch replied. "At my age, one learns which ones deserve obedience." Helena looked at the woman's worn black bonnet. "You may lose your position. I have been threatened with dismissal since the old Duke was in leading strings. It has lost its flavour." The smallest warmth touched Helena's chest. Mrs. Finch placed the valise inside. "Besides, Your Grace, Greythorne was once a fine house. Someone ought to remember where the linen is kept." Julian appeared at the top of the steps without a hat. He had not come to bid his wife farewell. A groom followed him carrying instructions for the coachman. His gaze settled on Mrs. Finch. "What are you doing?" "Travelling north, Your Grace." "I did not assign you to Greythorne." "No, Your Grace." Julian stared at her, evidently unaccustomed to servants agreeing with him while ignoring his command. Helena stepped into the carriage. Julian approached the open door. "Greythorne's caretaker will have received notice. Dr. Pritchard has packed sufficient medicine for 3 months." 3 months, Helena repeated. How thoughtful. Something moved behind his expression. Perhaps shame, but it passed too quickly to deserve a name. "You will be comfortable." "Will I?" He rested one gloved hand on the carriage door. "This arrangement need not be unpleasant. You announced my approaching death over pheasant." His jaw tightened. "You knew this was not a love match. I knew you required my money. I did not know you required my silence as well." "Take care, Helena." It was the first time he had spoken her Christian name. She met his gaze. "Of what?" "You have already told London I shall be dead by spring." The coachman flicked the reins before Julian could answer. The carriage lurched away, leaving him beneath the portico as sleet silvered his dark hair. Helena watched until he disappeared into the grey morning. Then she coughed into her handkerchief and found a bright thread of red upon the linen. Mrs. Finch saw it. Neither woman spoke for several miles. The journey took 2 days. Roads turned from frozen ruts to brown rivers of mud. Rain entered through a crack beside the carriage window, wetting Helena's sleeve. Each mile north stripped another layer from the promises made in London. By the time they reached Greythorne, dusk had swallowed the hills. The house stood beyond iron gates hanging crooked from their hinges. It was built of dark stone, 3 stories high, with chimneys like blackened fingers against the sky. Ivy smothered the eastern wall. Several windows had been boarded. No lamps shone. The carriage stopped. "This cannot be occupied," the footman said. "It is now," Mrs. Finch replied. The caretaker had received no notice. Mr. Abel Reed, a widower with one arm damaged in a threshing accident, came from the lodge carrying a lantern and a rusted pistol. His daughter, Clara, followed with a shawl pulled over her nightdress. When he saw the crest on the carriage, he lowered the weapon. "Your Grace," he said, staring at Helena, "we were told the house was to remain shut." "By whom?" "Mr. Silas Pike, His Grace's steward." Helena stepped down. Her boots sank into mud above the ankles. The cold entered her bones with such speed that black spots moved across her vision. Mrs. Finch caught her elbow. Helena remained upright. "Is there coal?" she asked. "A little in the lower shed." "Dry wood? Some? Food?" Clara looked embarrassed. "Potatoes, Your Grace. 2 hens. A heel of cheese." Behind them, the Rothbury carriage was already turning. The footman had unloaded both trunks and left them in the rain. Helena watched the carriage lights retreat down the drive. Julian had not merely sent her away. He had placed her in a sealed house without supplies and trusted Winter to finish what illness had begun. Mr. Reed unlocked the front doors. The hinges groaned like an animal disturbed in sleep. Air rolled out, carrying damp plaster, mouse droppings, cold soot, and the faint sweetness of rotting apples. Dust covered the entrance hall. Rainwater had collected beneath a cracked section of ceiling. dripping into a green porcelain bowl left there years before. Every drop echoed. Mrs. Finch raised the lantern. Portraits watched from the walls beneath veils of grime. "Welcome to Greythorne," she said. Helena's knees buckled. Mr. Reed lifted her before she struck the stone floor. Her cheek rested against his rough coat while the lantern light spun above her. Mrs. Finch called for blankets. Clara ran towards the kitchen. Someone opened one of Dr. Pritchard's bottles beneath Helena's nose, filling her lungs with vinegar and hartshorn. Her eyes opened. The house seemed to breathe around her. For one dreadful moment, Helena understood why Julian believed she would never leave it alive. But the inevitable funeral never came. Helena awoke the next morning in a bed that smelled of damp feathers. Frost coated the inside of the windows, turning each pane milky white. A warming pan had been passed between the sheets, but the mattress remained cold beneath her spine. Mrs. Finch sat beside the fire, feeding it broken pieces of a wardrobe. "The house has 32 rooms," she said. "Only 4 fireplaces draw properly. The kitchen range is cracked, the western roof leaks, and rats have eaten His Grace's grandmother's correspondence." Helena pushed herself against the pillows. "You make it sound almost welcoming. I have not yet mentioned the well. Must you? It is frozen?" Helena coughed. Pain scraped beneath her ribs. Mrs. Finch measured laudanum into a spoon, but Helena turned her face away. Later, Dr. Pritchard said every 4 hours. Dr. Pritchard also said I should avoid exertion, conversation, cold, hot air, rich food, plain food, excitement and melancholy. I cannot obey all of him at once. Mrs. Finch studied the spoon. "The medicine makes me sleep," Helena said. "When I wake, I am weaker. It quiets the cough. It quiets everything." Mrs. Finch returned the dose to its bottle. "Then we shall first try broth." By noon, the inhabited portion of Greythorne had moved into the old morning room. Mr. Reed repaired its shutters. Clara swept years of dust from the hearth. Mrs. Finch boiled potatoes with the last bone from the caretaker's Christmas ham. Helena sat wrapped in 3 shawls and examined the supplies. Dr. Pritchard had packed for her final months: 6 bottles of laudanum, 2 packets of grey powder, 1 jar of leeches, no strengthening cordial, no iron, tonic, no instructions for fresh food, no letter to a local physician. Beneath the medicines lay a folded sheet bearing Julian's seal. Helena broke it. "My steward, Mr. Pike, will remit a monthly allowance for the maintenance of Greythorne. You are not to trouble yourself with estate affairs. The northern rents are administered from Rothbury. Should your condition worsen, Dr. Pritchard will be summoned." There was no affectionate closing. Helena turned the page over. Nothing had been written on the back. "How many tenants belong to Greythorne?" she asked Mr. Reed. 23 farms, Your Grace. Or there were when the old dowager lived. And now? 17. The others left. Why? Mr. Reed looked towards the door. Mr. Pike raised the rents. Clara answered for him. He took the thatch allowance away too. Her father frowned. "Clara, it is true." Helena folded Julian's letter. "When did Mr. Pike last visit?" "Michaelmas," Reed said. "He collected rents and marked 2 cottages for seizure." "For unpaid rent?" "Yes, Your Grace." "Did he leave money for repairs?" Mr. Reed's silence answered. A knock sounded from the front of the house. Clara went still. "No one comes here." The knock sounded again, 3 measured blows. Mr. Reed reached for his coat. Helena rose before he could stop her. The room tilted, but she gripped the table until it steadied. At the entrance stood a man of perhaps 40, carrying a black medical bag. Snow had gathered on the shoulders of his worn coat. His hair was threaded with silver at the temples, and his boots were caked with road mud. "Dr. Nathaniel Mercer," he said. "I attend the village and the surrounding farms. Word reached me that Her Grace had arrived ill." "Word travels quickly," Helena said. "It travels fastest when people are frightened." He glanced past her towards the unheated hall. "May I examine you?" "Dr. Pritchard has already done so." "Dr. Pritchard is 200 miles away." Helena allowed him into the morning room. Mercer listened to her, breathing through a wooden monaural stethoscope, pressing the narrow end against her back. He examined her eyes, nails, gums, and the pulse at her throat. He asked when the cough had begun, what she ate, how often she fainted, and what medicine she had taken. Then he uncorked the laudanum and smelled it. How many drops? 20 after meals and at bedtime. His brows drew together. For how long? 6 weeks. And the grey powder? Dr. Pritchard called it a restorative. Mercer touched a grain to a glass plate and examined it. Antimonial powder. It causes sweating and vomiting. In a strong patient, physicians sometimes use it to reduce fever. In your condition, repeated doses would leave you scarcely able to stand. Mrs. Finch's face hardened. She was told to take it twice daily. Mercer placed the packet down. "Do I have consumption?" Helena asked. "You have a cough and severe weakness. I heard no cavity in the lungs. The blood may come from a damaged throat after violent coughing. I cannot promise what another winter might do, but I see no proof that you are dying." The room became very quiet. Helena stared at the 6 brown bottles. "Then why did Dr. Pritchard say I would not see spring?" Mercer looked at her with the careful expression of a man choosing between courtesy and truth. Perhaps he found certainty more profitable than care. He closed his bag and instructed Mrs. Finch to stop the antimonial powder. The laudanum was to be reduced gradually, not removed in a single night. Helena needed eggs, broth, green vegetables, clean water, dry rooms and movement whenever her strength permitted. "We have potatoes," Helena said. "Then begin with potatoes." After he left, Mrs. Finch gathered the grey powders and dropped them into the fire. They flared briefly, releasing a sharp mineral smell. Helena lifted Julian's letter again. "The northern rents are administered from Rothbury." She read the sentence twice, then she held it near the flame. Mrs. Finch took it from her before it caught. "Never burn a man's instructions, Your Grace." "Why not?" "Because one day he may deny giving them." Helena looked towards the window. Beyond the frost, neglected fields stretched beneath snow. 17 tenant families lived on land that was apparently generating rents. Yet Greythorne had no coal, food, or repairs. She reached for the bell pull beside the fireplace. The cord came away from the wall in her hand. Mrs. Finch stared at it. Helena began to laugh. The sound was small at first, then roughened into a cough. Mrs. Finch brought a cloth, but Helena waved it aside until she could breathe. "Have Mr. Reed open the estate room," she said. "It may be locked, then he may break it." Dr. Mercer ordered rest. "I have been resting for 6 weeks. It has nearly killed me." The estate room occupied the coldest corner of the ground floor. Its lock surrendered to a hammer. Inside, shelves sagged beneath bundles of deeds, rent rolls, maps, and ledgers bound in cracked calfskin. Mice had eaten the corners of several pages. The ink had faded to brown. A layer of soot covered the desk. Helena found the most recent ledger and carried it to the morning room. Every entry from Greythorne was written in Silas Pike's narrow hand. Rent collected from 17 farms, £1,840. Roofing allowance, £200. Drainage improvements, £315. Household maintenance, £400. Helena looked around the room. Rainwater tapped into a bucket beside the wall. £400, she murmured. Mrs. Finch read over her shoulder. "There has not been 400 pence spent here." Mr. Reed removed his cap. "We received no drainage works either. The lower field floods whenever the river rises." "Did the tenants sign receipts?" Mr. Pike took their marks in his own book. Helena turned pages. 3 years of repairs had been charged against Greythorne. None appeared to exist. A drawer at the bottom of the desk resisted when she pulled it. Mr. Reed forced it open with a chisel. Inside lay old correspondence from Julian's grandmother, household bills, and a sealed packet addressed to the trustees of the Ashworth marriage settlement. Helena recognized this of Mr. Edmund Bellamy, her late mother's solicitor. The packet had never been sent. Her fingers tightened around it. The postmark would have been dated 11 years earlier, long before her marriage. Her name appeared in the Dowager Duchess's handwriting beneath the address. To be opened by Miss Helena Ashworth upon her marriage into the Harrow family. Mrs. Finch whispered, "How could she have known? She and my mother were friends." Helena had known that much, but little more. Both women had died before Helena's 16th birthday. Her uncle dismissed their friendship as a youthful attachment of no consequence. Helena broke the brittle seal. The first page contained a personal letter. "My dear Helena, if you are reading this, then the men around us have arranged what your mother and I feared they might. Rothbury is a great house with great appetites. It consumes money, loyalty, and occasionally the women foolish enough to believe its beauty makes it kind. I cannot prevent your marriage. I may, however, ensure you possess one door that no harrowman can close against you. Greythorne was purchased with my own inheritance and is not bound to the Rothbury entail. I have directed that it be used as security for any marriage settlement between you and my grandson. Your mother's trustees hold the relevant deed. If the Duke fails to provide the maintenance named in that settlement for 3 consecutive months, Greythorne may be conveyed for your sole and separate use. Read every schedule before you sign. Men who rely upon a woman's ignorance often mistake silence for surrender." The second document was a copy of a deed. Helena carried it to the window, where the winter light was strongest. Her marriage settlement did indeed name Greythorne as security. Julian was required to provide £500 quarterly for her separate maintenance, beginning on the 5th day of January. Failure to make payment for 3 months allowed the trustees to transfer the house and 1,200 acres to Helena on Lady Day, the 25th of March. She remembered the signing at her uncle's library. Julian had entered late, smelling of rain and horse. He had turned pages without reading them. "Where is the maintenance payment?" Helena asked. Mrs. Finch looked at the empty shelves. No one answered. A debt was coming due. For the first fortnight, Helena measured her life in spoonfuls of broth and steps across the morning room. 6 steps to the window, 9 to the fireplace, 14 to the door and back. Without the grey powder, food remained in her stomach. As Mrs. Finch reduced the laudanum, pain and wakefulness returned, but so did pieces of the world she had forgotten. She heard the wrens beneath the eaves. She noticed the pattern carved into the mantel. She tasted salt in the broth instead of medicine. Her hands still shook, though now from hunger rather than stupor. Clara Reed began bringing eggs from the caretaker's hens. When the hens produced only 2, she visited tenant cottages and returned with 6 more, along with carrots, onions, and a jar of preserved gooseberries. "The tenants sent them," she said. "They owe me nothing. They said the old Duchess never let a sick household go without broth." Helena looked at the vegetables arranged in Clara's basket. Greythorne's tenants had little enough, yet they had fed the woman sent there to replace the graveyard's next occupant. "Write down every contribution," Helena said. "Each family will be repaid." Clara smiled. "In money, in whatever they need most." The first tenant Helena met was Mary Holt, a widow with 4 children and a roof split above their sleeping loft. Pike had charged her £3 for repairs that were never made, then threatened eviction when she withheld the rent. Helena went to the cottage in Mr. Reed's small cart. Dr. Mercer objected. Mrs. Finch objected more loudly. Helena wore 2 cloaks and ignored them both. Inside, the smell of wet straw and wood smoke caught in her throat. A basin had been placed beneath the leak. Ice floated on its surface. Mary Holt curtsied so deeply she nearly lost her balance. "Please stand," Helena said. "Show me the roof." The widow hesitated. Mr. Pike said complaints were insolence. "Mr. Pike is not here. He will return at Lady Day. Then we should give him something worth complaining about." They inspected the roof, the rotten window frames, and the flour bin containing enough meal for perhaps 2 days. Helena took notes while Clara held the ink bottle inside her cloak to keep it from freezing. At the next farm, a collapsed culvert had flooded 6 acres. At another, a barn beam had cracked because the promised timber never arrived. Helena found the same sin in every cottage. Money collected, repairs entered into the ledger, work abandoned. By sunset, her chest burned and her feet were numb. Mrs. Finch waited at Greythorne's doors with an expression of thunder. "You may scold me after supper," Helena said. "I intend to scold you during supper as well." Helena climbed the steps without assistance. Halfway up, her knees weakened. A hand caught her from behind. Dr. Mercer had ridden from the village after hearing of her tour. "If you fall ill again," he said, "I shall prescribe chains. If you can find chains in this house, sell them. We need roofing slate." He almost smiled. That evening, Helena opened the estate ledger beside the fire. She compared tenant statements against Pike's entries until numbers blurred. £300 had supposedly purchased Welsh slate. The roof remained patched with rotten thatch. A bill from a London jeweller had been hidden among the estate vouchers. It described a garnet necklace costing £260. The payment had been entered as drainage improvements. Helena had seen those garnets at her wedding dinner. Lady Cressida had worn them. While discussing mourning black, Helena laid the bill beside Julian's letter and the deed to Greythorne. "How much money remains in the house?" she asked Mrs. Finch. 11 shillings and 4pence, and in my personal purse, £7. It would not purchase enough slate for one cottage, much less 6 farms. Helena turned to the last page of the ledger. Greythorne's old watermill had been listed as inoperative for 9 years. Yet Mr. Reed had said its wheels still turned after heavy rain. Why was the mill closed? Mr. Pike claimed it cost more to run than it earned. Did anyone verify that? No. Helena dipped her pen. Send for the miller. Within 3 days, Greythorne's abandoned mill smelled of fresh-cut timber, whetstone and river water. The wheel had not failed. Pike had ordered its sluice gate chained and dismissed the miller. The grinding stones required cleaning. 1 gear needed replacement, and the floor was thick with rat droppings, but the structure remained sound. The former miller, Samuel Baines, stood with both hands resting on his cane. "I could have her running in 10 days, he said. "If I had 6 men and oak for the gear, what would it cost? £20, perhaps 25. Helena had 7. She removed her wedding pearls that evening. Mrs. Finch watched from the dressing table. "Those belong to you. Then they are mine to sell. They are the only jewels His Grace gave you. His Grace gave me a house without coal." The pearls brought £82 from a jeweller in Matlock. Helena spent 25 on the mill, 12 on coal, 14 on roof repairs for the worst cottages, and 6 on seed potatoes. The remainder paid wages. She kept every receipt. By the first week of February, flour dust hung in the mill like pale mist. The wheel groaned, caught, and began to turn. Water thundered beneath the floor. Samuel Baines placed his palm against the first warm sack of meal, as though greeting an old friend. Greythorne's tenants cheered. Helena stood among them with flour on the sleeve of her black wool gown. Her face remained thin, but colour had returned beneath her skin. She could cross the yard without stopping to breathe. Mr. Baines had negotiated a contract to supply flour to 2 neighbouring villages. Payment would arrive before Lady Day. "Your Grace," Mary Holt said, "Mr. Pike will claim it belongs to the Duke." Helena looked at the turning wheel. "The profits will remain in a separate account until my solicitor determines whose property they are." "You have a solicitor?" "I have his name." Helena had written to Edmund Bellamy 4 times. No reply came. Then, on a wet Tuesday morning, Clara discovered that every letter had been opened and resealed before reaching the postcart. The 5th letter never left Greythorne. Mr. Reed found it inside the pocket of a stable boy employed by Pike's local agent. The boy wept and confessed that he had been paid £1 to intercept anything addressed to Bellamy. Helena questioned him in the estate room. "Who paid you?" "Mr. Gage, Your Grace," he said. "The Duke ordered it." "Did you hear the Duke give such an order?" "No." "Then you will not claim that he did." She gave the boy food and sent him home with a warning. The intercepted letter was placed inside a new envelope and carried personally to the railway station by Dr. Mercer. 2 days later, a telegram arrived. Bellamy was coming. The message contained only 6 words: "Do not sign anything before I arrive." That same afternoon, the sound of wheels rolled through the front gates. A black travelling carriage stopped before the house. Its polished panels bore the Rothbury crest. Julian stepped down. He wore a dark greatcoat and gloves of pale grey leather. London clung to him in the scent of expensive soap, cigar smoke, and rooms warm enough to waste coal. His eyes moved from the repaired shutters to the carts waiting beside the revived mill. Helena stood at the top of the steps. She had imagined his return many times during the long January nights. In some versions, she struck him. In others, she made him kneel in the mud. Instead, she said, "Your Grace." His gaze remained fixed upon her face. "You are out of bed." "I frequently am." He climbed one step. "Pritchard said you would be unable to walk by February." Dr. Pritchard was mistaken, apparently. He looked beyond her into the entrance hall. Fires burned. The floors had been scrubbed. The cracked basin had disappeared. Fresh rush mats covered the worst stone. What has happened here? Maintenance. With whose authority? With the authority of the person required to live beneath the roof. Julian's mouth flattened. "We will speak inside. We are speaking now." A groom and 2 clerks stood near the carriage. Tenant workers had paused by the mill. Julian lowered his voice. "I did not travel from London to quarrel on the steps." "Then your journey has already disappointed you." His eyes flashed. For an instant, Helena saw the man who had warned her to take care. Yet she no longer sat at the far end of his table, with medicine clouding her thoughts. Behind her stood Mrs. Finch, Clara, Mr. Reed, and half a dozen labourers whose wages bore Helena's signature. Julian noticed them as well. "Inside," he repeated. Helena turned and led him to the morning room. He stopped when he saw the ledgers spread across the table. "What are these?" "Greythorne's accounts. I instructed you not to involve yourself in estate business, and I discovered that your instructions do not repair roofs." He removed his gloves 1 finger at a time. "Silas Pike administers these lands. Very profitably. For Rothbury. For Lady Cressida's jeweller." Helena slid the garnet invoice towards him. Julian read it. His expression did not change, but the paper tightened between his fingers. "Where did you find this?" "Filed as a drainage expense." "Cressida purchased those herself, with Greythorne's rent money." "You do not know that. The account number is written on the reverse." He turned it over. The quiet click of Mrs. Finch closing the door sounded unusually loud. Julian placed the bill on the table. "Pike may have misclassified an expense. Then he has misclassified 3 years of roofing, drainage, timber, seed, coal, and household maintenance. Those are serious accusations. They are serious thefts." He walked towards the fire, then back. "Why did you not write to me?" "I did. I received nothing. Someone employed by your agent intercepted my letters." Julian looked at her. "You believe I ordered that?" "I believe you left the management of your estate to people who profit from your refusal to look closely." His hand struck the table. "You know nothing of what it costs to hold Rothbury together." Helena did not flinch. £40,000, according to our marriage settlement. Colour rose along his cheekbones. "That money discharged obligations created before you entered this family. And now Greythorne's tenants are paying for garnets. You will not speak of Cressida as though she were a common thief." Helena's gaze rested on the invoice between them. "Then she should not wear stolen stones." The door opened. Mr. Reed entered carrying a silver tray. On it lay a sealed letter bearing a London postmark. "For Her Grace." Julian recognized the seal. "That is from Bellamy." Helena took the letter. "Open it," Julian said. "It is addressed to me. I am your husband, and this is my correspondence." His surprise lasted only a heartbeat, but she saw it. Perhaps no woman had ever denied him so small a privilege. Helena broke the seal. Bellamy confirmed that he would arrive on the 22nd of March, 3 days before Lady Day. He also warned that Silas Pike had attempted to obtain loans against Greythorne, despite having no legal authority to mortgage the property separately. At the bottom, Bellamy had written another sentence. "The Duke has failed to make the first maintenance payment. Under the settlement, the default period has begun." Helena folded the letter. "What does he say?" Julian asked. "That you owe me £500. He gave a short, incredulous laugh. "I owe you." The first quarterly maintenance payment was due on the 5th of January. Pike handles those disbursements. Pike has not paid it. Then he will. From which account? The Rothbury Bank has refused his drafts. Julian's stillness confirmed the rumour. Helena had found 3 returned bills in the estate papers. But until that moment she had not known whether the larger estate was truly insolvent. He reached for Bellamy's letter. Helena moved it beyond his grasp. "You used my settlement to discharge your debts," she said. "Yet Rothbury is still unable to pay £500. You do not understand the structure of a ducal estate, then explain it." He looked towards the window. Outside, sacks of flour were being loaded onto a cart. "The southern farms failed after 2 wet harvests," he said at last. "My father borrowed against everything not protected by the entail. I inherited the title, the principal house, and £37,000 in liabilities. Your settlement prevented a public sale. Why did you not tell me before the wedding? Would it have altered the agreement? No. Then what purpose would humiliation have served?" Helena stared at him. He could recognize humiliation when it belonged to him. "You might have tried honesty," she said. "Honesty does not persuade creditors, nor does abandonment." His gaze shifted back to her face. For the first time, he seemed to see the woman beneath the title he had purchased. "You are stronger," he said. "Yes." Pritchard's treatment succeeded. "Doctor." Mercer stopped Pritchard's treatment. Julian's eyes narrowed. Helena placed the 6 laudanum bottles and the empty powder packets on the table. She described Mercer's findings without embellishment. Each fact removed another trace of certainty from Julian's face. "Pritchard has attended my family for 20 years, he said. "Then he has had 20 years to learn which errors you prefer not to question. He would not deliberately harm you. He sent enough laudanum to keep me insensible until April." Julian uncorked 1 bottle. The bitter medicinal smell reached across the table. "I did not know." Helena's voice remained quiet. "You did not ask." The words struck harder than anger. A carriage door slammed outside. Mrs. Finch moved to the window. "We have another visitor." Lady Cressida Mowbray entered Greythorne wearing the garnets. She brought Dr. Pritchard with her. Cressida swept into the morning room as if the house already belonged to her. Her travelling gown was deep crimson, trimmed with black braid. Melted snow shone on her boots. Dr. Pritchard followed, thin and pale, carrying the same expression of solemn authority he had worn beside Helena's bed in London. "My dear Julian," Cressida said, "you left without a word." Her gaze moved to Helena. The smile froze. "Your Grace, how improved you look. I have disappointed several people." Cressida touched Julian's sleeve. "Dr. Pritchard was gravely concerned when we learned that you had abandoned your treatment." "I did not abandon it," Helena said. "I survived it." Pritchard placed his bag on a chair. "You may be experiencing a temporary rally. Consumptive patients often display deceptive strength shortly before a decline. Dr. Mercer found no evidence of consumption. A village practitioner, a physician who examined me while I was awake." Cressida sighed. "Helena, this hostility cannot be good for your nerves. It appears to be excellent for my lungs." Julian held up the packet that had contained the antimonial powder. "Why did you prescribe this twice daily?" Pritchard's eyes flickered towards Cressida. "To reduce inflammation. She could barely eat. A regrettable effect. You told me she would be dead by spring." Pritchard straightened. "I gave the opinion requested of me." No one breathed. Julian's voice dropped. "Requested by whom?" Pritchard's face emptied. Cressida stepped between them. "He means the opinion expected from a physician." "You were all but begging him for certainty, Julian. You said you could not bear months or years of watching your wife linger." Helena looked at her husband. Julian's mouth opened, then closed. That was answer enough. He had not asked Pritchard to kill her. He had asked how quickly death might release him. The physician had supplied the prediction that suited him, and Julian had never questioned the medicine supporting it. Cressida removed her gloves. "This house has made everyone melodramatic. Helena is clearly better. We should be grateful and return to London." "I am not returning," Helena said. "As Julian's wife, your place is with him." "My place was apparently here until the funeral." Cressida's eyes hardened. "You cannot remain indefinitely in a property belonging to the Duke." Helena saw Julian glance towards Bellamy's letter. He knew Cressida did not. "Lady Day is 6 weeks away," Helena said. "Let us discuss ownership then." Pritchard reached for Helena's wrist. "I must examine you." She stepped back. Mrs. Finch opened the door. "Her Grace has declined. I am her physician." "No longer." Pritchard looked to Julian. The Duke remained beside the fire, the garnet invoice in his hand. "You should leave," he said. Pritchard hesitated. "Your Grace, you heard my wife." It was the first time Julian had defended her, and he did it without looking at her. Cressida's fingers curled around her gloves. "Julian, may I speak with you privately?" "No." The single word altered the room. Cressida's face lost its polish. Beneath it lay fury, raw, frightened, and much older than the jewels at her throat. She turned to Helena. "Do not mistake a temporary amusement for victory. You are a sick woman playing at estate management." Helena looked at the garnets. "And you are wearing 3 tenant roofs around your neck." Cressida struck her. The blow turned Helena's face and broke the skin inside her lip. Julian seized Cressida's wrist. "You will never touch her again." Cressida stared at him. "You left her here to die." The truth of it stood between all 4 of them. Julian released her as though burned. Cressida laughed once, without mirth. "Do not pretend virtue now. You chose me at her wedding table. You told me spring would free us." Julian's face had gone grey. Helena tasted blood. She pressed a handkerchief to her mouth. "Mrs. Finch," she said, "show Lady Cressida and Dr. Pritchard to their carriage." Cressida did not move. "This is not your house." Helena met her gaze. "Not yet." After the carriage left, Julian stood alone in the entrance hall. Snow blew through the open door and melted across the clean floor. Helena walked past him. "Did you know about the intercepted letters?" he asked. "No." It took him a moment to understand that she had answered the accusation he had not spoken. "You think I arranged this. I think you arranged not to care." He followed her to the foot of the stairs. "Helena," she stopped. "I believed Pritchard." "You believed him because he promised you what you wanted. I never wished you dead. You merely planned your happiness around it." His shoulders lowered by a fraction. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing. I can pay the maintenance. With borrowed money? That is my concern. It becomes mine when my home is the security." He looked up at the staircase, the portraits, the repaired plaster, and the lamp burning where darkness had greeted her 6 weeks earlier. "Greythorne is not your home. It became my home when your carriage left before I reached the door." Helena climbed the stairs. On the landing, she turned back. "Return to London, Your Grace. Your mistress is waiting, and I have work in the morning." Julian did not leave. A snowstorm closed the northern road that night. By morning, drifts rose against the gates, and the railway line beyond Matlock had been blocked. Mrs. Finch assigned the Duke his grandmother's old bedroom, where the chimney smoked and the mattress sagged. Helena objected only when she learned that a labourer had been asked to surrender his warmer room. "His Grace may endure what he considered suitable for me," she said. Julian heard her. He slept in the cold room without complaint. For the next 4 days, Greythorne forced him to witness everything his absence had allowed. He saw Mary, Holt's children, carrying dry rushes into their newly repaired cottage. He watched men clear the flooded culvert with tools purchased by Helena's pearls. He examined mill accounts showing a profit after only 2 weeks. At luncheon, he noticed that Helena ate bread, broth, and half an apple while ensuring the workers received meat. At night, he heard her cough through the wall, though she never summoned anyone. On the 3rd morning, he found her in the estate room at 7, writing letters with ink warmed beside a candle. "You should be resting," he said. "You have already tried that cure." He placed a folded document on her desk. "This is an order dismissing Pike from management of Greythorne." Helena read it. "You believe me now? I examined the London accountants. The garnet necklace was one of 11 false expenses. How much? £4,600 over 3 years. Taken by Pike, taken through him. Some payments went to Cressida's accounts. Will you prosecute?" Julian's gaze rested on the fire. "A public prosecution would bring scandal. Then you intend to protect her?" "I intend to protect the title. Your tenants cannot eat a title." His eyes came back to hers. Helena slid the dismissal order across the desk. "Your signature is not enough. Pike holds 3-year contracts with the mill merchants. He can still claim proceeds until they are challenged. I will have my solicitor examine them. Your solicitor prepared them, then Bellamy can do so. You objected to my writing to him. I was wrong. The words came stiffly, as if dragged across stone. Helena studied Julian's face. Pride still stood in every line of him, but it was no longer unbroken. Say it again, she said. His jaw moved. I was wrong. About the letters, about Pike, about Pritchard, and Greythorne. He looked around the estate room. About Greythorne. Helena waited. He understood what remained. About you, he said. The apology did not restore the wedding dinner or erase the carriage tracks leading away from the abandoned house. Yet it was the first honest thing Julian had given her. A shout rose from the courtyard. Mr. Reed entered without knocking. The mill sluice has been opened. Helena stood. What? The chain was cut in the night. River's too high. If the gate stays open, the lower wheel will tear free. They ran. Snowmelt had swollen the river into a brown, violent current. Water hammered through the mill channel. The great wheels spun too quickly, its paddles striking spray against the walls. Samuel Baines struggled with the control lever. 2 labourers hauled on a rope attached to the gate, but the current held it open. Helena reached the bank. "Get away from the wheel," she shouted. The support beam cracked. A labourer slipped and vanished into the channel. Julian threw off his coat and went after him. The water dragged both men towards the wheel. Helena seized the end of the safety rope and wrapped it around a mooring post. Mr. Reed and 3 others pulled. Julian caught the labourer's collar just before the current carried him beneath the paddles. Again, Helena cried. They hauled until Julian struck the bank. Hands dragged both men from the water behind them. The wheel's axle broke with a report like a gunshot. Timber splintered across the channel. The wheel lurched sideways and stopped. The mill fell silent. Julian lay in the mud, coughing river water. The rescued labourer gasped beside him. Helena knelt and pressed both hands to Julian's shoulders. "Look at me." His eyes opened. For one breath, neither remembered titles, settlements, or the woman waiting in London. Then Julian looked towards the ruined wheel. "This was cut," he said. Mr. Reed held up the severed chain. The metal bore fresh marks. Pike had not accepted his dismissal. He had declared war. When the roads opened, Julian sent for a magistrate. Silas Pike could not be found. His London rooms were empty, and his local agent claimed not to know where he had gone. The damage to the mill cost £50. Production stopped. The flour contract carried a penalty if Greythorne failed to deliver before Lady Day. Helena had £37 remaining. Julian offered the difference. She refused. "You would rather lose the contract?" he asked. "I would rather know whether Greythorne can survive without money borrowed from a man attempting to retain it. This is not charity. No. It would appear in your accounts as maintenance. That is what it is. The settlement requires £500. You cannot preserve ownership by offering 13. His expression hardened. "You have calculated this carefully. I calculated nothing until you left me without coal." For 2 days, Helena searched the old ledgers. Julian worked at the opposite end of the estate table. They spoke only when numbers required it. The answer appeared in his grandmother's household book. Greythorne possessed timber rights on 40 acres of mature larch, planted 28 years earlier. Pike's accounts valued the trees as firewood. A railway contractor in Chesterfield required durable timber for sleepers and would pay nearly £400 for selected cutting. Helena negotiated through Bellamy by telegram. Only the marked trees would be felled. The tenant woodcutters received fair wages. The contractor advanced enough money to repair the wheel. By the first week of March, the mill turned again. Julian watched the first flour sacks leave. "You found more money in 10 days than Pike found in 3 years, he said. Pike found it. He placed it around Cressida's throat. Julian did not defend her. The weather softened. Snow withdrew into the hedgerows, revealing black earth and early green shoots. Helena walked farther each morning. Her cough remained, but the handkerchief showed no more blood. One afternoon, Dr. Mercer brought a letter recovered from Pritchard's London assistant. The young man had fled his employer after seeing Helena's name in the newspaper. The letter was written by Cressida. Continue the powders. H must remain too weak to examine anything at Greythorne. J believes the decline natural and will not interfere. When spring releases him, your remaining account will be paid in full. Helena read it twice. The initials did not require explanation. Cressida had not merely taken estate money. She had paid Pritchard to prolong Helena's illness and ensure the Duke's indifference remained undisturbed. Julian stood by the window while she read. "I want that letter," he said. "No. It concerns my household. It concerns my life. I will take it to the magistrate. Bellamy will take it. You do not trust me." Helena folded the letter into her writing case. "Should I?" Pain crossed his face, but he did not answer. At dusk, a servant found a black-edged envelope beneath the front door. Inside was a proof from a London stationer. The Duchess of Rothbury, after a prolonged illness, borne with Christian patience, passed peacefully at Greythorne House. The date had been left blank. Cressida had already ordered Helena's death notices. Julian tore the proof in half. Helena took both pieces from him and placed them with the other evidence. "No," he said. "Destroy it. Why? Because no one should have to keep such a thing. I shall keep everything." That night, footsteps moved in the corridor outside Helena's room. She sat up. The handle turned. Helena had begun locking the door after Cressida's visit. Someone tested it once, then withdrew. A floorboard creaked towards the western stairs. Helena wrapped herself in a robe and opened the door. Julian emerged from his room carrying a candle. Mr. Reed appeared at the end of the passage with a lantern and pistol. They followed damp footprints to the estate room. The window stood open. Papers covered the floor. The drawer containing the original settlement copy had been forced. Helena's writing case was gone. Mr. Reed leaned through the window. Horse tracks in the kitchen garden. Julian swore and ran for the stairs. Helena seized his sleeve. "He wants you to follow. Pike has the letter. He has copies. Bellamy has the original. You sent it?" "This afternoon." Relief flashed across Julian's face. Then smoke entered the corridor. The intruder had scattered hot coals beneath the estate shelves. Flames climbed the dry papers with terrifying speed. Mrs. Finch rang the servant's alarm. Bell wires clanged through the house. Tenants came from nearby cottages carrying buckets. Carpets were soaked and beaten against doorframes. Julian dragged a burning shelf away from the wall, scorching both hands through his gloves. Helena formed a line from the kitchen pump. Smoke blackened the ceiling. Heat cracked the windows. The old ledgers curled into ash. "Everyone out!" Julian shouted. "Not until the deed box is removed." "Helena, leave it." "That box contains every tenant agreement." She covered her mouth and entered the smoke. A beam fell behind her. The room vanished in orange light. She could no longer see the door. Heat tightened her lungs. Her foot struck the iron deed box beneath the desk, but it was too heavy to lift. Julian appeared through the smoke. He wrapped his coat around her and seized the box handle. "Move." They reached the corridor as part of the ceiling collapsed. Outside, Helena sank onto the wet grass, coughing until Dr. Mercer held a cloth over her mouth. Julian knelt beside her with blistered hands. The estate room burned for another hour. At dawn, only scorched walls and blackened beams remained. The deed box survived. Inside it, beneath the tenant agreements, lay Julian's grandmother's original conveyance of Greythorne and the schedule attached to Helena's marriage settlement. Pike had tried to destroy the evidence because Lady Day was approaching. He had failed. On the 22nd of March, Edmund Bellamy arrived from London with a clerk, 2 document cases, and the solemn expression of a man who billed by the quarter hour. He was 71 and shaped like a closed umbrella. He bowed to Helena, ignored Julian's extended hand, and asked to see the settlement. After examining the fire-damaged papers, Bellamy confirmed what Helena already knew. Greythorne did not belong to the ducal entail. The property had been vested in trustees as security for Helena's maintenance. The first payment remained unpaid. Unless Julian provided the entire £500 before noon on Lady Day, the trustees could convey Greythorne to Helena for her sole and separate use. The new Married Women's Property Act has removed any profitable ambiguity, Bellamy said. Her Grace may own, manage, and derive income from the property independently of her husband. Julian looked towards Helena. Can the payment still prevent the conveyance if it is made in full? How much money remains in the Rothbury account? Helena asked. Julian did not pretend not to understand. £412, after wages before. Bellamy closed the document case. Then His Grace faces a decision. Julian could preserve Greythorne by withholding wages from servants and labourers, borrowing again, or selling the last unentailed objects from Rothbury House. Helena expected him to do it. A man who had sacrificed her dignity to protect his title might sacrifice anyone's wages to protect his land. Instead, Julian opened the iron deed box and removed the dismissal order against Pike. I want warrants issued for Pike, Pritchard, and Lady Cressida. Bellamy raised one eyebrow. Lady Cressida is the daughter of a marquess. She conspired to poison my wife. You should understand what a public proceeding will do to your family name. I understand what protecting the name has already done. Helena watched him sign the complaint. His scorched fingers shook. On the morning of Lady Day, the first daffodil opened beneath Greythorne's eastern wall. At 10:30, 3 carriages entered the drive. Silas Pike stepped from the first, accompanied by 2 hired bailiffs and Julian's former solicitor, Mr. Carow. Dr. Pritchard emerged from the second. Lady Cressida arrived in the third. She wore black. Helena stood in Greythorne's drawing room beside Bellamy and the local magistrate. Julian waited near the fireplace. Mrs. Finch, Mr. Reed, Mary Holt, and Samuel Baines had been asked to give evidence. Cressida entered with a folded mourning veil over one arm. Your Grace, she said to Helena. Still performing miracles? Helena glanced at the veil. Still planning funerals? Pike placed a mortgage document on the table. Greythorne was pledged against a loan of £6,000 last November. Payment has fallen due. My clients have come to take possession. Bellamy adjusted his spectacles. By whose authority was the mortgage executed? His Grace's estate office. Julian examined the signature. This is not mine, Pike smiled. Your seal is affixed. Stolen from my London desk. A serious accusation. So is forgery. Mr. Carow opened another document. The Duke's late grandmother transferred all beneficial interest in Greythorne to the Rothbury estate before her death. Bellamy produced the original deed from the iron box. No, he said, she did not. For the next hour, documents crossed the table. Pike's mortgage relied upon a copied deed bearing a false date. Carow argued that Helena's settlement was invalid because a married woman could not hold property against her husband. Bellamy placed the printed text of the 1882 Act beside him. Your education is 1 year out of date. Cressida's composure began to crack. No one cares about a mouldering country house, she said. Julian, pay the woman and end this spectacle. Every face turned towards the Duke. Noon approached. If Julian produced the maintenance payment before the hour, Greythorne would remain under his control. If he did not, the trustees would complete the conveyance. Pike smiled at him. Your Grace, I have brought a bank draft for £100. Combined with your available funds, it will satisfy the Duchess's maintenance. You need only confirm my authority as steward. The room went still. Pike was offering Julian a way to retain the house. In return, the Duke would have to restore him, abandon the charges, and permit the theft to continue. Julian took the draft. Helena felt every winter room close around her again. The wedding table, the medicine bottle, the carriage turning from Greythorne's gates. Cressida stepped closer to him. This ends today, she whispered. Give Bellamy the money. Helena will return to London, and Greythorne can be sold. Julian studied the bank draft. Then he held it to the fire. The paper blackened between his fingers. Pike lunged, but Julian released it into the flames. I will not buy back what I abandoned, he said. The clock began striking 12:01. Cressida's face drained of colour. 2. Bellamy placed the conveyance before Helena. 3. Pike reached inside his coat. Muster Reed raised the pistol before Pike could draw his own. 4. Remove your hands slowly, the magistrate ordered. 5. Pike obeyed. 6. Dr. Pritchard moved towards the door. Mrs. Finch closed it in his face. 7. Helena took Bellamy's pen. 8. Cressida caught Julian's sleeve. You promised me. He looked at her mourning gown. I promised you the death of a woman whose name I scarcely knew. That is the shame I shall carry. It will not become her grave. 9. Helena dipped the pen into the ink. 10. Pritchard's voice broke. I never meant to kill her. 11. Cressida turned on him. Be silent. 12. The final stroke faded through the room. Helena signed. Bellamy sprinkled Pounce over the wet ink, tipped the fine powder away, and pressed the blotting sheet down. Greythorne House and its 1,200 acres are now vested in her Grace, the Duchess of Rothbury, for her sole and separate use. Cressida stared at Helena. You have nothing, she said. A leaking house, insolvent tenants, and a title borrowed from a man who never loved you. Helena looked through the drawing-room windows. The repaired mill wheel turned beside the river. New slate shone on Mary Holt's roof. Tenant children carried early daffodils towards the kitchen. The flower contracts lay paid in the estate box. I have exactly what you could not understand, Helena said. Something built by people who know its value. The magistrate ordered Pike searched. The bailiff found the stolen writing case beneath his carriage seat, along with forged seals and intercepted correspondence. Dr. Pritchard collapsed into a chair. I followed her instructions, he said, pointing at Cressida. Lady Cressida paid me. She said the Duke desired certainty. Cressida struck him across the face. The magistrate called for both to be detained. As the constable approached, Cressida looked to Julian. You cannot allow this. Think of what they will print. Julian's gaze rested on Helena. For years, fear of scandal had governed every choice he made. It had kept corrupt stewards employed, mistresses indulged, creditors deceived, and an innocent wife drugged in a frozen house. He opened the drawing-room door. Print the truth, he said. Cressida was led outside, wearing the mourning black intended for Helena. Pike and Pritchard followed. The daffodils bent beneath the carriage wheels as they departed, but their stems rose again after the mud settled. The proceedings lasted several months. Silas Pike was convicted of forgery, embezzlement, and attempted arson. Mr. Carrow lost his license to practice. Dr. Pritchard admitted administering harmful treatments in exchange for payment and was imprisoned after other former patients came forward. Cressida's family prevented a full criminal trial by paying restitution and sending her abroad under the supervision of an aunt. London society called it a continental retreat. Greythorne's tenants called it escape. Julian made no attempt to soften the evidence. He sold his London horses, closed half of Rothbury House, and dismissed the servants who had assisted Pike. Every stolen pound recovered from Cressida's accounts was returned to Greythorne. Helena accepted the money. She did not accept Julian. He moved to a rented farmhouse beyond the eastern boundary and worked with Bellamy to reorganize the remaining Rothbury debts. When business required him at Greythorne, he requested an appointment like any other visitor. In June, Helena found him repairing a broken fence beside Mary Holt's cottage. You employ men for that, she said. I cannot afford to. Then your poverty has improved you. He leaned against the hammer. Sun had darkened his face, and a scar crossed one hand where the estate room fire had burned him. Will you walk with me? For 10 minutes. They walked along the river. Julian did not ask forgiveness again. He had learned that repeated apologies could become another demand upon the person injured. Instead, he spoke of the southern farms and the families Pike had threatened. He asked Helena's advice, listened to the answer, and followed it. At the bridge, he stopped. I loved Cressida because she required nothing of me except money, he said. You required truth before you asked for anything else. I required coal. A reluctant smile touched his mouth. And coal. Helena rested her hands on the warm stone parapet. I cannot become the wife you expected. I hope you never do, and I will not return Greythorne, I know. This house will remain mine, even if we reconcile. It should. She looked at him then, The proud Duke, who had raised his champagne while predicting her death, had expected obedience because the law, the title, and every dining guest assured him it was his right. The man beside the river had learned to ask permission before crossing a boundary. That did not erase what he had done. It meant he had finally begun doing something different. "You may dine at Greythorne on Sunday," Helena said. "Mrs. Finch serves at 7, Julian bowed. "Thank you, Your Grace." By the following spring, Greythorne employed 43 people. The mill supplied flour across 3 counties. The lower fields had been drained, the empty farms occupied, and every tenant cottage given a sound roof. Helena established a small infirmary beside Dr. Mercer's practice, and required that every medicine be labelled with its contents and dose. The old laudanum bottles were melted down and remade into blue glass panes for the infirmary door. On the first anniversary of Lady Day, Helena held a dinner in the restored Great Hall. There were no mistresses at the Duke's right hand and no guests waiting for a woman to die. Julian sat beside Helena because she had placed his name there. After dinner, they walked to the eastern garden. Daffodils covered the ground beneath the old stone wall. Their scent was faint, green, and clean. "I said you would not see spring," Julian murmured. "You were correct." He looked at her. "The woman you left here did not see it," Helena said. "She ceased to exist before January ended." Julian lowered his head. "And the woman standing here? She owns the house." He laughed, though his eyes shone. Helena took his arm, not because a contract required it, not because a title commanded it, because, after a year of watching him rebuild what pride had ruined, she wished to. Behind them, Greythorne's windows burned gold against the evening. Flour dust drifted from the mill. Somewhere in the courtyard, Mrs. Finch scolded a footman for carrying muddy boots across a clean floor. Helena entered her house as its bells marked the hour, with spring at her back, and the Duke waiting until she invited him across the threshold. Thank you for staying with Helena's complete story. A story of survival, earned power, and a woman who refused to accept the grave others had prepared for her. If her journey from an abandoned bride to the true mistress of Greythorne moved you, please give this video a like. It helps the algorithm carry our historical dramas to more romance lovers. Share this story with someone who enjoys proud dukes, courageous heroines, betrayal, redemption, and hard-won love. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you do not miss our next full historical romance story. And tell us in the comments, would you have allowed Julian to earn a second chance, or would you have closed Greythorne's door forever?